Hey, good evening, viewers, and
Good
thank you
evening, viewers,
again
and thank
for
you again for
coming up. Mombi,
being
can
here.
you reduce that volume?
Mommy, can you reduce that?
Sorry,
Yeah,
I can't get your request.
Yes, so
so welcome to Hugh Conversations.
welcome
And
to Hugh Conversations. And
this evening's program
this
is very special.
program is very
Discussing
special in
the budget,
discussing
the budget of Zambia,
the
which the
budget,
Minister
the
of
budget of
Finance
Zambia,
will be
which the
presenting
Minister
this.
of Finance will be presenting this budget.
Because the budget is a people's budget,
Because the
people's
budget is a people's budget, people
like to, would like to use this opportunity to
would
allow
like
as
to
many
use
people
this opportunity to allow us to
interact with the
interact with
budget document
uh,
by
budget
allowing
document
people to
by allowing
interact
people
with the
to
budget, like
interact
people
with budget,
follow what
like
the minister is presenting.
follow what is presented.
Mumbi,
Mumbi,
Yes, Pilato, I'm here.
I'm getting a lot of feedback from there.
I'm getting a lot of feedback from there.
Okay, let me work with the sound.
Yes,
Mm,
thank you. We're good.
is this
So, okay, so what I'm saying is this week's program is, and tonight's program is specifically designed to allow people to interact with the budget and the budget presentation that will be happening in Parliament on Friday, this coming Friday. So, starting today,
mhm.
tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, till Friday, we'll be discussing the budget and how the budget can be used can be used as a tool in addressing inequality challenges in Zambia. So, for us to create a platform for people to understand what the budget is and how the people can engage in, this program is designed specifically to be that platform and allow people to interact with the budget. Mumbi is not a finance minister, but for the purposes of
Mhm.
this meeting, for the purpose of this program, I'll be calling finance minister. And in the first 20 minutes, she'll present to us what our ideal budget would be. And after our presentation, we'll start asking her questions and how she would deal with the challenges of inequality and other issues in Zambia. So, Honorable Minister, you can go ahead and present your budget.
Okay, Pilato, don't make it so formal before people who don't know me get misled that I am a minister. I am an ordinary Zambian youth who is just a very concerned citizen and actively takes part in the decision made by the country's leadership, as well as fairly comment and fairly influence on in all necessary means to change the decisions that may seem harmful for those that are good for the people. Uh, in our budget discussion today, you won't see a lot of numbers. I think my discussion, the discussion here on my side, is going to be hugely based on facts more than the numbers. Not to discredit the value of the numbers, but what I want from this discussion is that any ordinary person, a layman, it should be in a layman's term for an ordinary person out there who doesn't know what is really found in the budget. They just know it by the name. What should they expect to see? What are the things that the citizens should be concerned about? And these are the ones which should cover for the larger majority of the citizens in the country. Um, so to get into it, what I would like the budget to look like. In fact, not just a like, but what for me would be an idea of what our budget should be next year would be some changes from what we had in the past few years. And my first issue here is going to start first with the education system. For the past 3 years, you will realize that we have been having a decrease in how our education system is being financed. In 2018, our education system was financed by 16.13%. And when we came to 2019, it reduced by a percentage plus, and it went to 15.29. And last year, the budget in the education system reduced to 12.38. My ideal idea is that this budget should increase next year in the education system. Firstly, we need to understand that currently the education is one of the areas that has been hugely affected in the country. Uh, Most of our young people, which is the largest, the largest portion of our population, are in schools. They are in the education system. Now, the education system is not only the formal one. These young people are in trade schools. These young people are in universities, and others are doing both in the semi-formal sector of learning. So it's either they are learning formally or informally. And these people have been hugely affected. And remember, once we're not investing in the education system, it means we are cutting down on information that the people are receiving, those which are those who are in schools. And then also, once the information is cut down, it means we begin to limit their innovation, because there has been a reduction in the exposure of information. I think we may all agree right now that the biggest weapon that any country can have, or any individual, is information to be ahead. And most of this is being transferred through the education system, both formally and informally. Um, so next year, I think we need to have a huge increase in the education system. Um, Firstly, when we begin to see how much we've lagged behind just in these 6 months, you will realize that Zambia being a slowly developing country, just last week there was an index release which was showing Zambia as one of the slowest developing countries, and it is the third slowest developing country in the world currently, which is quite sad. And the least that we could do is begin to limit the information that our people must begin to have in order to compete at the global level as global citizens. Um, so for the formal sector, I'll do a focus on two. The formal sector, for the students who are in universities, students who are just in the normal schools, those for the general education, and the informal sector. So for the formal sector, why we need an increased budget is this. Firstly, our students have not been going to school for the past 6 months. And for the past 3 years, we've had one of the hugest drops in the financing of the education system. Uh, Currently, majority of our youths right now, they are not being able to go to school, because we also know that the budget reduced for the education system last year, and very few people managed to get access to bursaries. So we are looking at those numbers that are left out, and we are looking at salvaging these that are in right now. And the best we can do is to provide them with the best of the financing to ensure that they keep their daily practices of education running. We need a society that is fully equipped with education. I think if you look at what is happening right now in the world, we are no longer having time to fight about. It's a rare case for us here in Africa, especially Zambia, to have things like war. Okay, right now the world is fighting cold wars. They are fighting for ideas, they are fighting for improvements to change the status of their country and their citizens. And most of the successful countries have hugely invested in their education system. Talk about countries like Japan, talk about the Scandinavian countries, talk about China. For them to develop their countries, and I love to give China as an example, because currently they are playing, they are the one of the big fish in the global market. 50 years ago, China was more poorer than Zambia, but 50 years later, we are the ones getting huge debt from them. They're the ones financing us. Okay. But this is because they prioritize education and decided to invest in it heavily. Okay, in order for them to equip their people with enough information to begin to compete with the world market and begin to lift the standards of their people through the information that they would learn. We need to begin to talk about how we are going to work with the student protection. Our students in universities need a lot of student protection. When I talk about student protection, I'm talking about how is their livelihood at the university? How are we going to help them sustain their lives? How do we help them reduce the worries on things like, oh, what are we going to eat today? How am I going to pay my school fees today? Uh, those things can be helped by government. I think we have a lot of areas where we are spending money, and this would be very useful to our education system. We need to revisit the bursaries. Right now, as the economies have gone down, we are aware that yes, we may have effects of low income at the global level, but we cannot compromise the fact that education plays a huge role in uplifting the standard of the level of our economy right now. So we need to begin to consider the students and bursaries. How do we get to work with that? How do we get to begin to give them those bursaries on time, and this time increase the number of students who will have access to bursaries? Because the least we need to do is to increase the number of young people in the streets who are well educated, well passed, but cannot have access to universities, especially in public education. We also need to revisit the issue of meal allowances for students. In as much as we can think they are used right now, the biggest support they need is to lessen their burden, especially when it comes to food. We need to understand that that meal allowance that the students are not getting currently plays a very big role in their life. It reduces their stress of having to think about what they'll eat every day. Others use that same meal allowance to pay for their school fees. Others even use that same money to support their families where they come from. But that is not the major part. The bigger part is to cushion a student out there to ensure that they are fully equipped with what is necessary for them to fight, especially in this difficult period. The other part of the education system is another group of our fellow young people and our fellow citizens that do not possess the academic intelligence, but are able to possess the skill intelligence. We need to begin to invest in skills schools. We need a lot of them, especially in rural areas. We must agree that rural areas have been heavily disadvantaged when it comes to being given a fair chance of having education. Now, we cannot begin to boast that now we've put secondary schools. It's not enough. How many teachers are they having in those rural areas? And are those teachers taken care of so that they can perform their duties effectively? We need to start investing in our lecturers. We need to begin to send trained people to go into rural areas and begin to put up trade schools to help train our fellow young people who are being disadvantaged. But not only in rural areas, also in urban areas, there are certain young people who are not able to pay for school fees and at the same time are not academically intelligent. How do we get to help them thrive in an area which demands for a lot of information and a lot of innovation? We must begin to provide them with trade schools. And this will require a huge investment. I think we must begin to cut down the things that may look like luxury next year, which which may be unnecessary allowances for our public officers. Just recently, the president, I think, was visiting. Is it Western Province? And the minister was there, was the Eastern Province minister, which doesn't make sense. What's his job in that province? And we're thinking, what allowance comes with him visiting him? The rest of the team, recently, the visitation that the president also made went with a team who used to cook with him. How much does it cost to remove those people? What are their allowances? We must begin to practice some certain type of physical discipline that will remove the leaders being the frontline beneficiaries in times of crisis. like this one we're having in the country currently. And therefore, we must have very huge, heavy investments in education and begin to cut down on those, what I'm terming luxury investments, which are highly benefiting our public officers, our leaders especially. The other thing also that we may have to hugely invest in is the environment. I think last year, if I can remember my numbers right, the president mentioned climate change 33 times in his presidential speech. Mentioning that term 33 times is quite huge, and it means that it's coming with a lot of emphasis. The fact that it's been mentioned 3 times, it's coming with a lot of emphasis. We must begin to invest in our environment. Currently, we are hugely complaining about climate change. We have seen how climate change has affected us. And as a country like Zambia, which does not have a strong economic system that supports itself and is highly dependent of donor funding and surviving on debt, it wouldn't be wise for us to begin to harm the environment. In the next 5, 10, 15 years, the likely possibility is that we're going to return to the soil. We are talking about diversification, and it means, and the huge discussion around diversification has been to return to the grounds, begin farming, begin doing fish farming, changing the type of energy we are using in order to sustain ourselves in this wave of change. And we are reducing at the same time the investment we are making in the environment. Look, the people that are not investing in the environment right now, sadly, this is the only reality that is available, is that they will not be there when it's time for this generation to take over. They will not be there when this generation gets into power. And we cannot begin to have the same problems as these ones now. And currently, we can tell that the mindsets which are there are not able to solve the current problems. So therefore, the best that they can offer their citizens right now is to protect their land, invest in the environment so much that when time comes for people who will be highly dependent on farming, even right now, we already have people who are highly dependent on farming, and those are largely the people who live in rural areas. Usually, the people in urban areas are beneficiaries. The urban area is a marketplace for those in rural areas. Even if we unfairly get their goods at a very low price, the truth is we are just the marketplace and they are the producers. If we look at the hardships they are facing right now, I think it would be very irresponsible of us as a country to let it become worse. Right now, we must begin to think of how we are going to survive should the situation get worse. But before it gets worse, is there anything we can control? Yes, we can be able to still take care of our environment. We can be able to still begin to use other methods of adapting in the new normal of climate change, in the new normal of global warming, and in the new normal of COVID-19. So I'm also expecting that to increase right now in this next year's budgets, rather. The third stream that I expect an increase in is health. The truth is we cannot compromise on health. We may be a very rich country, but the minute we begin to compromise on our health, we an entire source of the country. If we have a citizenry that is unhealthy, you know what we begin to do? We begin to get the money that we are supposed to use for our economic development to begin to heal the sick citizens, and the graph of our economy begins to go down, because we are getting the money that we are supposed to use to invest in our economy to begin to serve people. And when those people are saved, they have no money at all to return back into the economy and keep it running. So we cannot undermine the health. We need to begin to really invest hugely in rural health, especially. But the sad part is, even if we're talking about the rural health, now also the urban health is also being affected. If currently we are talking about an institution like a clinic not having Panadol, what more NV? Because Panadol is a most common painkiller. But if health centers, if UTH cannot have Panadol, if I can go to the clinic today, me who is in Lusaka, and they have to prescribe Panadol for me, it says a lot about what our economy looks like. Unfortunately, you cannot assume or speak for the economy, it speaks for itself. And the behavior of the people in a society reflects what the economy is saying. Unfortunately, it can only be expressed through the citizens' standards of living, through what the citizens can access, and through what the citizens are being denied. So no matter how much we can convince our people that, oh, we are working and the economy is okay, as long as those things are not retaining what is efficient enough to support them for their daily livelihood, it's no longer safe, and it's no longer we can no longer describe it as economic stability, because the people are not benefiting, as the term itself says. Looking at my time, my 20 minutes of my presentation is done, and I think I've touched on the three things that I feel are very necessary for an increase in the budget next year.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through 1, 2, 3, 4 questions from what our viewers are saying, and then I'll contribute with my questions. So for those that are watching us, that have just joined us, we are trying to discuss the budget and see what people uh, can contribute in their thoughts. What is it that they think that this new budget will tackle, or what is it that these people, what the young people feel should be given special attention, and where should that much money go? So Marcus is a friend. Marcus says, talking of the environment, the Pachoka Gorge hydropower scheme is just another debt trap for Zambia. I'm gonna get another question. Sangamuma says debt financing has affected this nation such that the fiscal policies set together with the monetary policies such that it's difficult to sustain the economy. The best way to get away of this hindrance is to set policies that will limit debts but maximize income generation from different sources like copper mining, gold mining, by having right investors and by having or choosing right leaders who are ready to invest without actually deliver for the people. Corruption is the biggest factor. Uh, so you talked about how we would like to spend the money. How do you think the government should increase income uh, its income coming next year? Like the revenues. If how do you imagine the tax system to be? What taxes do you think the government should introduce or should get rid of, and who should be taxed and who shouldn't?
Okay, that's a very huge question, by the way. Very huge, in fact, but a very important question. I
Yeah.
think before I answer that, I like the comment that is it Muma? Yes,
Muma.
Sanga is from putting out. Yes, he's mentioned quite a number of things that the government must begin to look at. The only worry about our government and those things that are being mentioned is I don't think we are getting enough information of what is really happening to the mines and all the other things that we see that we can get a lot of income from currently. Because as we are seeing, if I remember my numbers right, we cannot run away from the fact that debt has really eaten up our economy, both internally and externally. Internally, meaning our people who are being owed by the government are still affected, and at the national level, the entire country is affected by the money that the country owes to our to the foreign community, to the international community. If you look at debt between June 2019 September, you will realize that we had quite a huge number of debt gotten, especially from SMEs. I think it moved from should be 60 60 billion to 85 billion within 3 months, which is quite high. No, I think that was for the domestic rather. The domestic debt moved from 60 to 85 billion from June to December, and the debt for the SMEs moved from 20 to somewhat 24, 26 billion, which is quite high. And if I'm not mistaken, we haven't even gotten an update on that, if it has been returned or how much has been returned. The other factor that is affecting us right now when it comes to our investment is that we are investing in corruption. What do I mean? The people who were supposed to make the decisions to protect the country against things like huge debt and corruption are the corrupt ones themselves. So they are investing in the corruption in such that they want highly practicing it, which is very difficult. We can't run away from the fact that corruption does exist. Yes, we may have defense to say no, but look at this year's or the 2019 FIC report. I think it also leaves much to be desired and to really be convinced to say, oh, this is where our country is at. The money that is lost is still too much of money to be lost, and having a financial institution that was underfinanced and the report was released is still saddening, because we don't know if that is all that is there to be said or there was more that wasn't said. So it still feels like an incomplete document. So when we start talking about investments, we really also need to think about how are we going to work with the debt. Remember, after next year, we need to be done with our Eurobonds. It shall be due in 2022. So before we talk about how we are going to invest, we need to have a plan of debt servicing. Okay? For when it comes to debt servicing, the first thing that we are supposed to kill, no matter how much difficult it is corruption, because that has been the hugest beneficiary of the country's finances. Corruption has benefited more than any other Zambian in this country, unfortunately. Than any other sector in this country, corruption has benefited more. And that is the first thing that we must kill. Because to be a situation where we are investing right, but corruption will still be benefiting more. So corruption must die before anything else. It is the virus in this case. When it comes to defeating corruption now, this is where now we really, and I mean it really and extremely, have to begin to strengthen our institutions. Firstly, we also need to see, in fact, in the coming budget, how much money is spent for things like unplanned expenditure. Because usually the unplanned expenditure is the one which leaves us confused on how every year our budget increases, but the next year's reports, the Auditor General's report, will have an increased misappropriated funds, and the FIC will have an increased expected missing funds, which is extremely shocking. So every year we increase the budget, and every year we have an increase in the missing money and in the misappropriated funds. So in this year's budget presentation, we need to see how much money is going to be allocated to misappropriation. That must be put out clearly. The citizens must know. We must begin to invest rightly in the authority that are in charge of cutting down corruption, such as SCC, the FIC itself as well. We must make sure that these people are fully funded and equipped to do their job rightly. In as much as we would love to say without interference, with hope that there won't be interference, of course. So firstly, corruption must be cut down, and it will only be done if we rightly finance the institutions that are in charge of putting out, or being in the front line of checks and balances of our leaders and how they can spending its money, well, as well as having some very serious physical discipline. If it were up to me as a citizen, and we begin to think about things that will return us back into shape, um, really, I think the things I mentioned cover much. But when it comes to generally investments, that would be away from things like the education sector, health, and environment. I think Muma's comment covered much. How is our government working with the mines. I think the mines have always hugely contributed to our revenue as a country through the tax that they pay, but also the rest of the people that are in the country and they do various businesses. I myself am a full taxpayer. I pay my tax from the water I buy. I pay my tax from my toothpaste. I pay my tax from everything. And we need to begin to see which one of those works best. I think the government has got a very good and the country rather has got a very good and dependable and capable individuals who would advise the government on which type of tax that they could advise to say, okay, this can be removed, okay, this cannot be removed, okay, this tax can work well for next year's budget. We really need to do a lot of, I must accept that we really need to do a lot of tax cut down as well. But we need to look at which type of tax affects the most vulnerable, which type of tax affects the most groups that employ the most Zambians and they are Zambian owned. The challenge with leaving a lot of tax on your citizens, especially those who have local businesses within the country, is that you give them a difficult environment for them to begin to employ other fellow Zambians because the concentration is on the tax. Okay. I think the capable men and women of the country who are able to advise on which tax can work best and which tax cannot work best for the country can be able to attest to that. That once you leave the citizens, your own citizens with a huge tax, it becomes difficult for them to survive. And once it becomes difficult for an internal citizen who is able to provide internal employment for a fellow Zambian, especially that right now the government isn't employing as much as as it was, and also that there are a lot of number of people who are uneducated and unqualified for the jobs, or we're having quite a very high competition of jobs, and we have a lot of graduates out there in the streets. There's a system where people are beginning to employ each other. So when our capable men and women are really gotten and sat down with, I think they can do a very good job in advising the government on which tax can be removed and which tax can stay in order to help sustain, especially the SMEs. I can tell you that in the areas or which we call commonly call Amakombon, these people depend on each other. A guy with one bar will employ about 5 young people who don't go to school. Okay, a woman with a restaurant will employ about 5 to 10 women, and they share the little money that they have. But when you look at the tax, these two examples, which are one of the most local businesses that most of our people do, you will realize that the tax that they have to pay at the council are very high. They have to pay a business levy. Then if you own a butcher, you have to pay for a health permit, and then you also have to pay for what do they call that meat handlers certificates. By the time you add those, and you also need to remember to say these are divided according to areas. So there's the common, and then there's a middle class, and then there's a high class. Okay, but if you see how much they have to spend in just having that to pay for those little taxes, such as the council taxes, you will realize that it is very high for them to keep going on with our daily lives. On which one would work best, I still insist that they are very much capable men and women who are very and extremely able to advise the government on which tax can be maintained and which tax cannot be maintained. I think the other investment that we can do to revive our economy right now is to also really do a huge investment in farming. We have an open market, and this open market is not Zambia. This open market is the DRC. I think I don't know at what level, if at all, we have ever received a report of how much exports we do and what type of goods we export to the DRC. Those who've gotten an opportunity to even be found just by the borders of Zambia and Congo, you will realize that our brothers and sisters from the DRC hugely flood our borders to come and have access to foods. But it is very shocking that the nearest and the most neighbor country right now cannot even provide for half of the population of the DRC, and yet they're dependent on us. We know that the DRC doesn't farm, but our people in the Rapula province, our people in the Copper Belt, and our people in Western and Northwestern province have still not been equipped enough to make that as a market which we can use to improve their lives. Believe me, if we do an investment which becomes a supply chain,
Yours.
yes,
Let's take another question so that you can carry them on.
yeah, sure.
Okay, so Lawrence Skangila Mutale Siamasamu says, before we even talk about the economy, there are critical factors that we have to take into consideration. We need to strengthen our government and institutions. There should be no government interference, such as the judiciary, police, reserve bank, SCCA, DEC, etc. By doing so, we would have brought back the investor confidence. Then we can look into the economy. Let me just read another one, so then you can respond to all of them in one breath. I'm watching from Wakanda. This is Mleta Kapatiso. I observe that our country is being run like a family tomato business, where the shopkeeper pockets some tomatoes to make soup for their homes without considering the collective interest of the owners of the legacy. We cannot even account for toothpicks. Rats, bakwe, dipeva, vantumbi are depriving us of the dignity of our economy. Let me just comment so you can touch on those as you respond. This one is coming from Lamek Kauseni. If South Africans are benefiting 80% from our country and the own of the land we are getting 20%, it's not normal. So talking about the government should do, it's to make sure, put tough measurements so that even the investors, as they are coming to do business here in our country, we should at least get what belongs to us, what the majority will benefit, and not minority will benefit. In short, Zambia should first fight corruption. I think maybe at that point you can just respond. I don't think there were questions there. There's comments. I think you can try to respond to those. Then we can proceed to the next question.
Yeah. Okay. So I think, as you can see, the complaints that are being shared by the people commenting are genuine, and these are the things we are talking about. I think to talk about the last comments that we are from reading about a comrade of ours who is complaining about how South Africans are benefiting more than Zambians. I think this is a complaint that has been there for quite some time. But I don't think we can at this point begin to blame the people or investors who are coming here for how our people are living. We must ask, where is our government? Look, it's like coming to blame your neighbor for coming in your house and eating chicken while you're eating vegetables. Where are your parents to make the rules? Okay, where are your parents to come and say, look, when neighbor comes here, this is your food. If you have to share the meat, this will be the rationale. You guys will eat this and you will give your neighbor this, such that even if they are not there, the rules that they've set are able to defend the people. How is our law structured when it comes to foreign investors? How much has the law equipped an average citizen to defend themselves even when an investor comes? So that also speaks a lot about the laws that we have and how much they're protecting our citizens, especially when it comes to dealing with foreign investors, because we can't say foreign investment bad. Foreign investment is important. We need to get to exchange culture. We need to get to exchange goods. Remember, the world itself is a market, and every position where you are becomes a global market for you to trade different types of goods and services. So they are not the problem. The problem, where are the parents to give the rules, and what are the rules that the country is having, that even if the government is not there, the law itself is able to defend and protect and put a Zambian citizen first and as the largest beneficiary of whatever investment that will happen between them and the foreign party. the issue of Mleta Kapate, so it's also the same that the Zambian people have been crying about for years and years. The people who are in front are eating more than the people who are here, making sure that they are paid for the job to make sure that we are eating. We must begin to agree to say the statement of "don't bite the finger that feeds you" should apply from citizens to our leaders, because the money that the leaders get paid for the cars that they drive, the houses that they live in, the free things that they get is as a result of us as citizens paying the tax for them to have those huge shares that they hugely benefit. Well, those positions that they sit in are positions that we citizens have hired them through voting to be there to make the decisions on our behalf. When we vote them into power, starting from the president to the listed person, we allow them, we give them a contract to work for 5 years, and their job is to benefit the institution first. Which institution? The institution is the country, and we employ them. And anybody else that they appoint, who the president appoints, or any other person in an appointing office, is just a subcontracted person who is still and must still be under the citizen's eye, and therefore they are also a beneficiary of what we the citizens are investing in, and that is our tax that we pay, that we use to pay them as well. So it's turning out that the people that we are paying are still eating more after we pay them, because they are not making decisions that are helping the citizens of the country. They are not investing in the necessary education that our people should learn. They are not investing in health to make sure that the larger population is healthy and fit enough to do vigorous activities that needs to help them be sustained every day without the government's arm. They're not investing enough in the environment to leave it well enough such that an ordinary citizen can still make use out of it, even if they're still even if a government is not there today, they'll still be able to produce. And that is the challenge. Indeed, in the shop, it is them eating the tomato before they see the benefits, they see the rest of the family benefits.
Okay, so this one is coming from Oliver Kashekele. Oliver Kashekele says inequality starts from distribution or allocation of these funds. And before the money reaches the intended destination, you find the figures on the paper are correct, but the actual money in physical is different. And my question is, what is the role of the Auditor General in Zambia, and what happens to those that swindle the beneficiary?
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you look at the auditor general's report, it basically updates us about the rest of the things that happened the previous year, including the financial expenditures, hugely. We cannot put the burden on the auditor general. That's why we always say, what are the laws saying? But also the bigger question is, are the people following what the law is saying? Recently, we've had a few sensitive cases of some of our ministers being accused of corruption, which is a very similar complaint to what the comrade is from asking here. But how how is the law itself being applied on them? One of the most difficult things that one can face, especially in a position of the one holding the whip, for example, the police and the court, is to face intimidation from the people who are their leaders, worse off, especially if they are appointed. I'll give a very common example that recently happened. When the president made a comment towards the investigation of the SEC and said, SEC is just trying to attack me, something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the complaint was something like that. When such a statement is made, it becomes very difficult for such an institution to write it, because statement coming from the powers that be already may seem to say, look, these people are attacking me. which is quite difficult. So how do you begin to attack a person that appointed you? Just the words themselves carry a lot of weight. Of the Auditor General, what he does is just he does the report. Yes, he has some powers, but remember, he works in line as well with the other authorities that are in charge of keeping the law in order. The question is, are our leaders following the law? And the bigger question that we also don't know how we're going to answer it is, if our leaders are following the law, why is it still so difficult for the law itself to just run over them? So you are wrong, and this is what should happen, but they still find a way to escape out of it. What makes it possible? What you can just say from there, what that clearly shows is that there's a lack of political will in people following the law. There's a lot of disrespect for the law. The courage is coming as a result of them being able to disrespect the law, but also the huger part is that the citizens themselves are not aware. If they knew, they would know how to hold the government accountable. They would know how to react to such things. But now the law has now been covered by individuals instead of the individuals are now covering the law instead of the law covering the individuals, which is becoming extremely difficult. So for my comment there, the truth is the Auditor General cannot work on his own, but with also other authorities that are in charge of checking on the law and order and enforcing it. So it's an entire cycle, and if one is broken, it's very difficult to mend it.
Thank you very much, Mumbi. So I'm gonna get a question from this one is from Master CK. Mr. Pilato, how many unemployed teachers do we have in Zambia? Okay, Mumbi will join us. I'm sure the internet connection has started doing what it does best for my guest. Yeah. So how many unemployed teachers do we have in Zambia this year? And what are the solutions which have been put in place in order to help them? So what we are doing is we are discussing what we hope to see in the budget in addressing inequality. So Mumbi is here sharing her thoughts. And Mumbi, there's a question from Master CK. Mr. Pilato. Oh, some people call me Mr. Pilato. Now, mfako bueno. Mwena mfako na pamutuecha kutengana. Mfako bueno. Eh, Master CK, no, Mr. Pilato. Now, mfako bueno mwandini. No, mtima wate mwe. Mr. Pilato, how many unemployed teachers do we have in Zambia this year? And what are the solutions which have been put in place in order to help them? So just remember that question, Mumbi. I want to pick another one. I saw another one about employment. I want to see if we can do the ones about employment. Okay. There is another one coming from Marcus.
Yes, please.
Marcus says, government can create unlimited jobs, but are they sustainable? Are they getting paid on time? So I think you can respond to these two questions in one breath.
Okay, great. The truth is this: a government alone cannot create employment for all, but they can create to a particular extent, and make the rest of the parts which they cannot create an enabling environment for those who can create for their fellow citizens. There are a lot of areas in which the government can create employment. One of the biggest areas where we know that we just can't come up and say, oh, we'll create this employment is things like the health system. We know the government does the employment for that. Things like the education system, the government does the employment of the teachers and the civil servants. But when we do not have, or rather the civil servants and teachers, or teachers and doctors rather fall under civil servants. When the government is not providing jobs as for positions of civil servants, what then can they do to help these other environments? Their job is now to make an enabling environment to make sure that those who are doing those activities are able to efficiently do their production, but at the same time provide employment for their fellow citizens. Right now, the way the economy is and the way the country has got a lot of debt, we don't really know if the government is able to hire as much, because remember, the more we hire, the more financing.
Okay, so is having the same network problems. I'm the only one that doesn't have those problems. I seem to be better. So what we are discussing is we're trying to make and create a platform where people can engage the budget. The Minister of Finance will be presenting the budget on Friday this week, on the 26th of September. But because the budget is a people's document, we want the people to understand it when it's presented. And we want people to hold their leaders accountable. We want people to.
Sorry, I'm being cut. I don't know what's going on with my network.
It's your network. No, this is
Just
Chinese state.
yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
you were
So
responding
I
to a
was
question.
saying the best thing, yes, the best thing that a government should do, knowing that we have very high debt and we don't know if they'll do a lot of employing next year, the best thing they can do is to offer an enabling environment for our local investors, our local entrepreneurs, and are being fully with funding and enough knowledge support for them to keep their businesses running and sustainable long enough for our country to, until our country is stable enough and the government is stable enough to employ more people, or just through making the environment friendly by either policies, the policies and the laws as well, just to make sure the local are supported and they're able to provide employment for one another. Oh, and then
Thank
there
you.
was a question for teachers. I
Yes.
don't have the actual statistics of the number of teachers and how this problem could be addressed. But I think from this statement, from the response I'm from giving, I mentioned to say I don't know how much the possibilities will be for the government to employ the teachers, considering that we have high debt rate. And it's not our problem, it's the government's problem. Because also the challenge is also the types of investments that they do with the money that we get, especially in Gashaka Kongola. Also, the other challenge that we have is when it comes to spending the Congolad money, is where does it go? I think not being bad, but the truth is there's a lot of expenditure that is going into Lusaka that could work well if invested in other areas. Yes, the complaints can be that we're having a lot of traffic, but the truth is we are having a lot of traffic in Lusaka because we have centered Lusaka as the business and the living place. If we decided to shift our economic investments and begin to return to what we're calling, let's return to the soil, since now it's a new song, or agriculture and diversification, and invested in the right environment, such as the rural areas, the I think we wouldn't have this much traffic, because the economic direction or the economic position would have changed to other countries. It would have been spread out, and that's when we are going to take roads there. But the problem is we've made Lusaka the heart of everything, including the heart of farming, and yet we don't even have land to really farm on here in Lusaka.
Okay, so this one is coming from Principal Kangwa. Principal Kangwa is saying, Mr. Pilato, is the national, people are calling him Mr. Pilato. I think I should start wearing a tie and,
Please do.
Mr. Pilato, is the national budget only effective for civil servants or for the general public? And why doesn't government provide full information about the budget? This is supposed to be Mumbi.
Okay.
Is the national budget only effective for civil servants or for the general public? And why doesn't government provide full information about the budget?
The name is the national budget. It's not the civil servants budget. The reason why we are not receiving full information is because the people with the information is choosing not to disclose the full information that citizens need to know. Also, the bigger challenge that we are facing, for a fellow citizen to ask if the national budget with the name national is for civil servants or the national budget itself, says a lot about what we tell people the budget is. It's not that the individual is down, but it says a lot about what we tell our people and show what our people people the budget is. I post today where CSPR is advocating for a child-friendly budget, meaning that budget is because a child is a person under the age of 18 should be able to understand this information. That is a very big part. How well do we write our budgets such that any ordinary citizen can read and understand? So, okay, for me, a person who is in this class, this is where I go, and these are the things I can benefit at this level, at this stage, and also in this particular environment I'm based in. So, no, the national budget, as I said, it's a national budget. It's for all Zambians. And we are not being given full information because the people with the information are holding the information. And remember, it's your right and it's in our constitution that you must have full information. The government and the state is actually mandated to inform citizens of any matter that concerns them, the constitutional right. And those people who are not given full information are withholding it against your own will because the constitution that protects has already commanded them to do so.
Thank you. Florida S. Chama, I swear we are not related, says, with the current economic challenges in our country, what sector do you think should be prioritized in order to revamp our economy?
Okay, I still maintain the education sector must be highly financed. I explained education, we're talking about the formal education. We need a huge investment in education, in research especially. We need to know what methods are going to help us improve and sustain our economy. And this can only be done if we do research, and the research can best be done in the education system by investing highly in the education system itself. The other investment that we can do that is still in the education system is investing into trade schools for our people who are not economically intelligent but are extremely skillfully just to make sure that the larger population, those who cannot manage to have who don't have the academic competence, are able to sustain themselves and provide basic needs, and they off the list of those who are highly dependent on government. So education, education, and education. Research, research, research.
Thank you, Mumbi. So this one is coming from Tinashe. Tinashe is saying it is mandatory for the people we put in offices to manage our finances and resources, to see to it that we are well fed, taken care of. I don't mean them giving us more money in our pockets. I'm talking about using our resources in accordance with in the benefits of the majority, not the top minority, jobless country. Do you want to respond to that?
That's a very fair compliment from my what my comrade is saying is true. We are not telling them to give them money. What we are asking them is to give us an enabling environment where we can still survive without their support. An enabling environment where if we still don't have a government, the country will still continue to run because the policies and the laws protect the citizens with or without the leaders in power. We want an environment where there's an equal distribution of available. Yes, we know that the resources are scarce, but we need an environment where these scarce resources are fairly distributed for the purpose of productive response in those investments we're going to make that is efficient enough keep our citizens sustained in their individual capacity and having them have monopoly over their basic needs.
This one is coming from Kaila Malele. Kaila Malele. Kaila, like a big one. Kaila is asking, is it possible that the government could be transparent and accept critics? Can they try by all means to open industries to manufacture materials within the country to export? Can the youth funds be easily accessible to all without corruption? Can they be open to the public for advice? Can they change the mentality of just sewn in they talk about winning the following elections. Don't we feel ashamed to see Rwanda doing better than Zambia? Can we reduce presidential escorts? What is your comment to that?
Let me make this clear. The idea of the government being responsible and informing you as they are supposed to do is not a matter of if it's possible or not. It's a matter of respecting the law. And Zambia is a democracy, and democracy respects the rule of law and human rights.
Mm.
Okay, so if you ask if it's possible, I think you are overgiving
Please don't disappear, Mumbi. Mumbi, don't disappear on me. Hey, Mumbi. Why is my network better? Why is my network better? Okay, so we're trying to understand the budget and see how we can have people engage the budget. We have obviously clocked about 60 minutes. But obviously, we'll try to see if we can get 10 more minutes so then we can respond to specific questions. So the budget, as we're waiting for Mumbi, I can make some noise. The budget is a public document. The budget is a document for the people. Just like we had the talk about Bill 10, just like you could access Bill 10 on the Parliament website, the budget as it is, it's a bill and can be accessed through the Parliament website. I don't know if they've availed it, they've made it available yet, but it should be available. So for people to go through. What the budget seeks to save is that it gives a direction to the country. It gives a direction in which the country should go in terms of income generation and expenses and how it's going to expend its money. So the budget is a very critical document. And in this call, we are discussing inequality. So looking at the budget, we should be able to see whether there is a commitment to challenging inequality, whether there is a commitment to addressing the problems that the people are facing or not. So the budget is that document. This program and so many programs, so I'm going to be running this program today, tomorrow, until Friday, because this is the last week we're doing here conversation. So this is the last set of programs we're doing. The idea is that people should be able to understand and look at the budget as a document of theirs, so that when we get into the year 2021 and you see the president, you see the ministers, or you see any other government office spending money, you should ask yourself, which part of the budget is this money coming from? Where is this coming from? If you, the people, do not understand, if you, the people, do not engage the budget, it will be difficult for people to be held accountable, because this expenditure must reflect to what was budgeted for. So the budget is a tool that we can use to hold our leaders accountable. And as we are waiting for Mumbi, I'll try to go through the questions, and those that I feel I can respond to, I'll be responding. So this is Kenny James. Kenny James is writing, is watching us on YouTube. Kenny James says, public service in African countries should be redefined. Then we will see who is really passionate about the people rather than the enriching themselves. I do agree. I would want to know the redefinition, what that redefinition should be. Abel Nkweto says, where does the toll gate money goes? Because this time around, they could have been finished all credits we borrowed from China. Abel Nkweto, I agree with you. I'm sure it goes in the treasury. Yeah, we heard that there was about $1 million money amount kwachas that went missing. Marcus says entrepreneurship needs to be taught in schools, and when young Zambians start businesses, they should enjoy tax holidays like foreign investors. I agree with that. Mukosha Ernesto, Mukosha is asking why the government is investing a lot of money in their long-term plans in construction of roads, while there is no medicine in hospitals and in clinics. I do not understand either. So the idea of roads is into sections or two classes, and obviously I'll confidently share about the road system. So there's what they call economic roads, and these roads are obviously what may be used to facilitate trade. And this trade could be between provinces or districts and between countries. So these are called economic roads. These economic roads could be, the example is like the greatest road is, because it connects Lusaka, Chongwe, and Eastern Province. And so what this road does is the farmers in Eastern Province can farm and use the road to bring stuff in Lusaka, and business people in Lusaka can drive safely, go to Eastern Province. So this road is an investment in that it facilitates for this transition for goods and services between the two provinces. But then there are roads that we have that are not economic, for economic benefits. These are just for smooth sailing, because you know when politicians have money, they want to buy expensive cars, they want to drive in, you know, they don't want their cars to wear out quickly. So they'll put a road kulilanda so that or they put a road kuchalala so that you can just drive in Chanchani. Those are very good roads, but then you cannot borrow money to do that road, because how are you going to pay back that loan? How are you going to pay back that in Congole? So if you borrow money and do an economic road, you are actually investing. So that's an investment. If you do not do that road, and it's not an investment road, it's just an expense. Mumbi is trying to join in, and hello, Mumbi. So, how are you gonna pay back that income? So Mumbi is here. Mumbi, you're gonna answer this question, and then you can conclude on the program. So, boss Pilato, you're explaining well about the budget, but the citizens are not explained well about this issue. Look at the bulletin. Not even an MP can give it clear and simple to the common citizen. Kevin, no. But Kevin, laka mdala. Ima manjura tumwala sa mdala tamuenshiga. Mira ndisho Mr. Kevin. Okay, sorry, Mumbi. I'm gonna let you close. So I was saying the budget is a people's document. There is no way somebody's gonna make a budget of the country without you knowing about what is budgeted, because it's your money. The government does not dig money. The government collects money from you as citizens and on behalf of you as a citizen. So it's your money that is put together. Therefore, how this money is used must be approved by you as a citizen. It must be speak to what your needs are as a people. So the budget is a people's document, and you, the people, must be interested in understanding what is in the budget. Mumbi, we are behind time. Obviously, we are late, and thank you to the network. You could respond to any question that you feel you can respond to, and then you can also conclude. But in your conclusion, I would like you to invite people to give a call to action. What should people do in making sure that the budget speaks to their needs? What should people do to make sure that there is accountability, there is adherence to the budget, and how money is expended? You are good.
Okay, great. So I'll respond to the last comment where my brother here is complaining about how the is not understood and how our leaders are the only ones talking about the budget. Look, I was explaining earlier before Network did me a favor and gave me a break that in the Constitution you have a right to information. And any information that requires that the country should know, the state has a responsibility to explain it. When we start talking about the state explain something to its citizens, it must take into consideration the types of groups that that is trying to disseminate that particular information to. So, meaning the leadership of the country has got a responsibility in ensuring that the budget, which is of national interest, is clearly explained to the various types of citizens that we have, the high class, low class, and the average. So, like I said, it's not a matter of it being possible or not. It's a matter of a right. And what is happening right now is a leadership that is disrespecting the rule of law of this country, particularly the law that tells them to say if a matter concerns the citizens, the state must tell it to its people, and it's their responsibility to explain it in a way that majority, better yet, all citizens are able to understand and interpret this document if they read it on their own. Um, in my closing remarks, what would be the call to action to ensure that the budget that we get to see has what the people want? I don't know if it's possible to change in what has already been written, which will be presented this Friday. Probably not. Um, but what I would love to see starting here, the best thing that could happen, my fellow youths, my fellow citizens, is to have an informed citizenry. Since we are not asking questions, it's going to be difficult for us to fairly contribute what we want, to fairly communicate to our leaders what we want. And they are using this and they're taking advantage of you citizens because we are not questioning them enough. Okay, the other way that we can, another call to action that we can also do is to put up look, these people represent your constituencies. You control them, you put them in power and you remove them in power, and you can make demands. It must begin to be a tradition for people to call out for their MPs to come and explain various issues that are important to their citizens and their constituencies. Because those people sit in parliament, okay, and say everything they're saying is coming as a result of them representing a particular constituency. So you have a right and tell them what to see. Right now we are in the digital era. The best thing that you also to make use of the digital migration we have done, especially in the new normal, let's make use of petitions. But make use of your existing MPs. Call them to show up in their physicalities. Ask them why and how and who, where, when. Okay, these questions must constantly be asked and they must hear from you. As far as I'm concerned, that is the best call to action that we can give our citizens. Them being able to call out their MPs and ask the questions, not only asking the questions, but also asking the right questions and putting demands that they must see. Do a follow up of some sort, whether it's starting from the smallest community in a constituency to the highest community in the entire country. We must be able to call out leaders and ask the questions of why, how, who, when, and where, and what.
Thank you very much, Mumbi. Thank you very much for those that have tuned in and watching, because we've come to an end. I'd like to respond to this beautiful question. And Principal Kangwa is asking, this question is coming to you, Mr. Pilato. Is it that politicians don't participate in this program because we've never seen any contribution from any politician? Because I think they can give good information. So it's very deliberate. I don't want to speak to politicians on this platform because politicians speak to us all the time. So politicians on radio stations, politicians are on TV stations, politicians are in the newspaper, politicians are everywhere. So this platform was created for people's voices, for people's consent, so then people can express themselves. So if we bring politicians here, then we'll have silenced our own voices as a people. This platform is specifically for the people. This program that we're doing today is people projecting what they feel or what they need should be involved or should be included in the budget, in the people's budget. If we bring politicians here, they will dominate again this platform. So I'm a politician we don't want. They read speeches, we don't want to be read speeches. We want to be talked to, we want to be engaged. So this platform is for the people to speak back to the people that have been reading speeches for us. So Mr. Principal Kangwa, politicians are not allowed on this platform because they speak all the time. We want ordinary people to speak back to power. So thank you very much, Mumbi, and thank you very much for everybody that has participated in this program this evening. Tomorrow we are back. So I'm going to be doing, like I said, we're going to do this from Monday today till Friday. And we'll be discussing the budget with the aim of making sure that the budget is a familiar document for all of us. So if you watched us, please tune in tomorrow. Go find out about the budget and ask questions tomorrow. As I'll be speaking to another interesting young Zambian who will be sharing what they hope to see in the budget, and they'll be sharing their own budget. Okay, this is what we want to see. For the Minister of Finance, I would like to ask one thing. Obviously, I'm sure by now you've done your budget, but then there should be digital infrastructure in Zambia. The COVID-19 situation has exposed a very big inequality between the rural and the urban, especially where it comes to education. So the digital infrastructure in the rural areas of Zambia is so bad that our people in the rural areas could not attend schools via the e-learning that your government had said we should do. So please, I'm sure you are updated because, you know, these are things that you should have in mind. Thank you very much and good night.